the way we acted, the way we behaved when it comes to sex. What type of damage do you think it did to the women that we were involved in, or the women that you've seen going through this cycle of unhealthy sexual behaviors from men?
Yeah, and look, transparency, like I wasn't that guy growing up. Like I didn't have sort of this long list of, when they say bodies going through. But even like I was sort of the guy in high school, like the chronic monogamous dude. But even with those women that I was with, I didn't have the skill set to help guide them along emotionally or talk about the impact that was there, right? So sort of a kid leading a kid, trying to sort of engage in these things that we were too young to be able to process at that point in time. So, I wish I had the skill set to talk about, like, hey, here's how this relationship is going to be able to this relationship is going to affect you long term. Here's how our negative behaviors are going to show up in the relationships that you have beyond this one. Like, even though we're 17 right now, and there's not malice in the way we treat one another, we just bring trauma to any engagement that you have with someone. And that trauma is only magnified when you have hurt people trying to buckle down together for it. So I wish I could have been able to helpfully deal with women in that way as a teenager, honestly, even to my early 20s, because I could talk to them and part ways in sort of a much more, in a much better fashion, that sort of, even if we don't work out, there's no damage done by this relationship, right? Like that. And that is something I learned later in life, that no matter who I'm with, even if you don't become my wife one day, you should leave this relationship with no damage or better off than you were before that. But I just didn't have that skill set, even for myself, much less to help any young women I was dealing with at the time.
Now, Aubrey, before you answer, Aubrey, remember I was there through your teens and your 20s. I don't call you later when I got it.
I'm speaking facts, like, you know what I'm saying? Exactly, was there with me. So, I know, you know what I'm saying? But I think I definitely, I kind of want to backtrack a little bit. And the reason why I want to backtrack a little bit is because of a lot of the things, speaking for me, was self-esteem building, right? So, I was skinny, big teeth, you know what I'm saying? I wasn't the flyest dude out there. So through these encounters and through these relationships, you know what I mean, I was trying to build myself up, right? Trying to build up my self-esteem and my self-worth. So the more women I can get, the more girls I can get, the more confident I felt about myself. But after a while, that cycle gets so toxic that that's all you do. That's your whole existence, is trying to impress, trying to catch, spent years doing that, years. So what are some of the effects that I may have had on others? I definitely know I probably did some emotional damage. Definitely probably did some emotional damage, definitely hurt some feelings. Might have opened up the floodgates to somebody who wasn't planning on being promiscuous to be promiscuous, and then possibly even having people do things that they never would have done, probably regretted doing, just because, I got them to do it. You know what I'm saying? And I know they would have never did it. This wasn't how they was raised. This ain't how they was act. But I almost kind of poisoned them and had them doing something that they wouldn't normally do. And now that's with them, right? So they got to live with that. I'm hoping and praying they moved on with that. But those are definitely some of the things I probably did in those reckless times, and those times where, I was just all about me, all about my flesh, and all about, my pleasure. And again, feeding that ego of feeling like I'm in control. And that's what it really all boils down to. It's a control thing, right? I'm in control. I can get you to do this. I can get you to do that. Or I can get her, or I can have her. It's really a control thing. And it's toxic. That behavior is toxic.
I think, Aubrey, I probably told you this story once before. A few years ago, I ran into a young lady that I used to deal with, like in my 20s, mid-20s, late 20s or something like that. And it was years before until I seen her, just probably like another 10 years later. So, you know, I'm coming up to her like, hey, how you doing? What you been up to? How's life going? And she started to kind of like just reveal some stuff to me. And she told me how she was in therapy and all that stuff. So I'm, you know, didn't want to get too deep into it. So I just like, I hope things are okay. And then she started to tell me that she was in therapy because of the relationships and, you know, the cycle that she's been in. And then she looked at me and was like, and said, hey, and you were one of the reasons I'm in therapy, like speaking about me. And like, that hit me like a ton of bricks when she said that to me, because in my 20s, I was just having fun. I was just, you know, just doing my thing, running around, probably had a collection, but not understanding or realizing the impact that I was having on somebody else. Like something that I took so lightly and so casually. This lady, I don't know if she was in love, but she was invested emotionally and psychologically. And when I just was able to walk away and just break it off because I got tired of doing it, like I left her damaged. And that's really why I want to have this conversation. I want to talk to generations that's coming up behind us, other young black men, sons that we have, nephews that we have, and want to be able to have them to look back at this video and learn from our lessons. So if you guys can give the younger generation some advice